We're following a developing story in Malaysia where the country is gearing up for next month's election. Now, Prime Minister Najib Razak is facing off against Malaysia's former leader Mahathir Mohamad and Anwar Ibrahim, a jailed former opposition leader. Najib is expected to win re-election, and that is despite corruption allegations. He's also capitalized on using race, religion, and ethnicity as political tools. So here to walk us through this story is CBSN contributor, Alex Kliment, and he writes for Signal, a newsletter produced by GZERO Media. Alex, thanks for joining us. You know, we talk a lot about domestic stories, but you guys always like to bring us up to speed on some international stories that are important as well that we may not be paying attention to. So we have this situation in Malaysia. We have an election coming up. There are racial tensions. Tell me why this election is significant.
Well, so Prime Minister Najib is looking to win his third term as Prime Minister. And one of the big stories in Malaysia is that over the past several years, he's been implicated in a massive billion-dollar corruption scandal, right? So he's heading into this election trying to kind of minimize the impact of that. His party actually lost the popular vote in the last elections in 2013. They only stayed in power because of gerrymandering. And of course, he's facing opposition from former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, who was sort of known as the father of modern Malaysia. He was a hugely influential politician in Malaysia for almost 20 years and was the mentor to current Prime Minister Najib. So he's facing off against his old mentor.
But he's expected to win.
But he's expected to win because he's doing a couple of things. First of all, gerrymandering is going to help him tremendously. That's something we're quite familiar with here in the U.S. as well. Secondly, he's throwing a lot of money to rural constituencies. And thirdly, and this is a particular point, is that he's really playing up kind of racial and ethnic divisions and sectarian divisions within Malaysia. In Malaysia, about two-thirds of the population are ethnic Malay, but they're disproportionately poor compared to a small Chinese minority. And so one of the things he's doing is he's casting himself as the defender of Malay rights. There's a long history of Malay-focused affirmative action programs, which he is pledging to continue. He's throwing more money at that. And he's also kind of closed ranks with a kind of hardline Islamist party in order to capitalize on the increasing appeal of more conservative forms of Islam in the country. Malaysia has long been a relatively socially harmonious place, so it's a dangerous thing that Prime Minister Najib is kind of looking to inflame ethnic and sectarian tensions as an electoral strategy.
So then has there been pushback from the government, an attempt to reduce the racial tensions, to implement laws that sort of banning racial discrimination or anything along those lines? Well,
one of the things is that actually the Malay minority has always benefited from state programs, not unlike affirmative action programs, meant to address the fact that they've traditionally been poorer than the Chinese minority. To the contrary, the government's not trying to rein this in. It's actually an electoral strategy for the Prime Minister in order to kind of inflame these tensions. And I think it's a big deal because if you look elsewhere in Southeast Asia, you look next door in Indonesia, it's also a society where you have an ethnic mix, a small Chinese minority that's disproportionately wealthy, questions of the appeal of radical Islam and even political Islam in Indonesia as well are an issue. So what happens in Malaysia could be a bellwether for other parts of Southeast Asia in a way that raises concern.
And so the opposition pretty much has no chance?
Pretty much has no chance. Well, actually, the Electoral Commission has actually ordered the main opposition party to disband, citing a technicality regarding the registration for the election. The media is largely state-controlled. The opposition doesn't stand much of a chance, no. And that's why I say it could be a bellwether for the region. I think it reflects this larger story that we sometimes talk about of leaders who are democratically elected using democratic institutions in order to consolidate a more authoritarian form of rule.
I'm thinking of Venezuela right now, actually.
Well, Venezuela is a much worse extreme. I mean, Malaysia is an economically very successful. I mean, Malaysia's been one of the economic.
It didn't start off like that in Venezuela, and the idea was he was going to speak sort of for the common man, and the same things that made him attractive I see happening here in Malaysia.
Yeah, I think the context is a little different, just in the sense that Malaysia's economy is much more balanced. I mean, Malaysia is one of the real economic growth miracles of the 20th century. I mean, in the mid-20th century, when it won independence, it was a very poor country. Now it's just at the border of being a high-income country, diversified economy. As I say, until now, relative social harmony. It's been a real model. The outcome of this election could throw some of that into doubt.
That is really interesting. Okay, some other interesting things in the newsletter. Trash, like literal the global pile of trash that we're looking at, that trash is sort of becoming sort of politicized.
Yeah, well, globally speaking, global politics is littered with garbage, right? And I mean that literally in the sense that if you look around the world right now, there are a number of protests, whether you look in the suburbs of Moscow, you look at the capital of Colombia, Bogota, you look at Lebanon, you look at southern Italy, you look at India. There's a number of places where trash has become a political issue. People are hitting the streets to protest either about whether trash is being picked up or where it's being dropped off, in most cases too close to people's houses, right? And I think that there's something inherently political about trash in the sense.
Well, we know it on a local level.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look outside on the sidewalk, but I think there's something inherently political about trash in the sense that, if trash is piling up, it's a very visible symbol that you can see and smell, really, that the state is not really doing its job, right? This is a basic function, and I think if we look around the world, particularly as poor and middle income countries get richer and their middle classes grow, trash will increase, right? As consumption grows, trash generation increases, and it's a big challenge for governments to cope with that, both at a local and national level.
No one wants it in their backyard.
So pick up your trash.
There you